White Fox is in Marvel Rivals as of today, and there's no need for me to be subtle in this introduction. I know why most of you are here. White Fox is far and away the most obscure character that the game has added to date, and you guys are wondering what's up with that. So, yeah, let's talk about her. I think you can probably hear in my voice that even I am shocked by this addition. I'm something of a Marvel expert myself, and while I heard there were leaks and rumors of White Fox coming to the game a while ago, I thought they were a fake-out leak. We know that NetEase puts fake-out leaks out there. That has been officially confirmed, and were I a betting man, I would have said that White Fox wasn't a real one. Here's the kicker though, the thing that makes this really strange for me especially to make a video on. If you've been on my channel for a bit, you might expect me to dig up a lot of complex, deep lore here, right? Rivals has added an obscure character, Sir Superhero is going to tell you all the weird details. That's happened a few times at this point. But with White Fox, no, not really. Most of you probably haven't heard of her, but that does not mean she's complex. White Fox is actually a shockingly straightforward character. The easiest way to explain what I mean by this, and why White Fox's inclusion in Rivals is fun to be sure, but also incredibly strange, is just to get going on the lore. So, let's do that. Let's talk about White Fox, and why her being in a mainstream game like Rivals was so incredibly unexpected. We'll begin with White Fox's origin story, which, as I promised right in the intro, is very straightforward. She got a whole origin one-shot comic a couple years back that lays the whole thing out in one place, so they really made my job easy today. White Fox's real name is Ami Han, and she is a being known as a Kumiho, the Korean iteration of the nine-tailed fox spirit myth, which appears in a few places around Asian folklore. Breaking some of the tropes around that folklore's use in the modern day though, White Fox is not ancient. Ami herself doesn't have an exact nailed down age, but she is late 20s or early 30s at the oldest. The ancient being in her story is Ami's mother. Some decades ago, this older Kumiho fell in love with, presumably a human man, we actually know basically nothing about White Fox's dad, but whatever, and gave birth to Ami, then raising her daughter in the ways of the Kumiho and teaching her how to use her abilities. Some years later though, the family was attacked by hunters accompanied by another Korean spirit called a Samjokgu. These things are also from real folklore. They are three-legged dogs, small in stature but very scrappy, and are one of the few entities with the divine power necessary to kill a Kumiho. Ami's mother and apparently all of the other Kumiho were killed by these creatures, but Ami herself survived, leaving her as the last of her kind. She then went to live with her aunt and uncle, on her father's side of course, and lived among humans. Despite taking her in, her relatives didn't really like Ami, and since she had to hide her true nature from everything else, she was something of a social outcast for most of her time growing up. Eventually though, when she was in high school, Ami found a friend. This was Yeji, a classmate of Ami's who by pure coincidence had an interest in folklore, and even though the Kumiho did not tell her the truth of her history, this gave them enough common ground to build a friendship on. Now, Yeji herself had no major problems to speak of, but her dad had borrowed money from the mob, and as his debts stacked up, eventually the criminals kidnapped his daughter to give him more incentive to pay. After learning that her friend was in danger, Ami decided to use the powers her mother had trained her in for the first time and go get Yeji back. Then, of course, because this is a superhero comic, there was another twist in play. It turns out that the leader of the criminals was a Samjokgu, also shapeshifted into human form, so they have a big monster fight. Then the superhero classics continue. On the last page of the book, as Ami is leaving the building, the police arrive, and a government operative approaches her and basically says, "Hey, we were surveilling these guys for a while. You clearly just took them out with cool superpowers. Do you want to come work for us and be a government-sanctioned hero?" An offer which Ami agrees to. And boom, White Fox's origin story is done. It's not bad per se, it's just very, very standard. She has superpowers, she hid them from society, then when one of her friends was in danger, she decided to use her power for good and became a hero afterwards. We've seen this kind of thing play out a million times. But now that we know the baseline of White Fox's first chronological adventure, we're going to have to move in a different direction for just a minute or two, because this origin story was not told in White Fox's first comic appearance. This story is written in a series of one-shot comics from 2019, somewhat confusingly titled Marvel Future Fight Firsts, which doesn't sound confusing when you first hear it, but just, well, let me explain. Future Fight is a Marvel mobile game, and it has created its own original characters before. In some cases, these characters have been popular enough to go into other media. For the best example, especially since this is a Rivals video technically, Luna Snow. Luna first debuted in Future Fight, and now she's in other games and comics, the works. So, with White Fox's origin story being told in a comic called Future Fight Firsts, you would think that she is also a character that debuted in Future Fight. And you would be wrong. She actually debuted 5 years earlier in a much weirder place. The technical first appearance of White Fox was in 2014, in a Marvel official but Korea-exclusive webcomic called Avengers Electric Rain. Now, I'd actually read most of White Fox's appearances before doing this video, but I gotta be honest, before sitting down to do today's research, I had never heard of Avengers Electric Rain before. This maybe isn't that surprising though when you learn that Electric Rain was originally published only in Korean. I have been able to dig up what I believe to be fan translations of the comic, but to be honest, they're not good. Thankfully, Marvel did very subtly release an official translation of the comic, though not until 2022, so for 8 years this flew under mine and a lot of other people's radars. So why did Marvel just kind of ignore this book for so long until White Fox had been established as a character separately? I'm not sure entirely, but if I had to guess, it's, I hate to be so negative, but I also have to be honest. I bet it's because Avengers Electric Rain is, it's pretty bad. Despite being the first appearance of White Fox, this is not a White Fox solo story by any means. As I guess the name should make fairly obvious, Avengers Electric Rain is an Avengers book, and follows the movie roster for the team as they go to South Korea and investigate what turns out to be a Hydra plot. While there, the Avengers work with White Fox, who is introduced to them as a superhero. And if you think I'm exaggerating about that introduction, oh baby, I'm not at all. White Fox is literally introduced to the Avengers after their initial fight as our superhero by the government. And this pattern continues. She's a superhero, she works with the government in an official capacity, and she has some kind of vague shape-shifting abilities. That is all the information you're going to get on White Fox in Avengers Electric Rain. And remember, this is her first appearance, 5 years before the whole Kumiho thing was nailed down. There's just nothing here. Even her personality beyond superhero is kinda non-existent. The only character beat White Fox has is a recurring gag where Tony Stark is very attracted to her because, you know, it's Tony Stark and a hot superwoman, but White Fox is more interested in Banner instead, which pisses Tony off to no end. And that's, again, that's it. It is one of the weakest starts to a character that I've ever seen, I think. Avengers Electric Rain didn't have a very long run, and it ends on a sort of the end question mark style cliffhanger that is never followed up on, of course. White Fox, though, would make future appearances, and her next one is in an equally random place. Only a couple of months after Electric Rain finished, White Fox would show up as a relatively major character in the Contest of Champions comic by Al Ewing, and if you're familiar with Marvel's video games, you might recognize a pattern here. The name Contest of Champions has appeared in various Marvel things in a couple different ways, but this comic in particular was directly a tie-in to the mobile game, and it's actually quite a good one. I highly recommend this series. It's a video game tie-in, but it is also canon to the main Marvel universe. As a function of that, Contest of Champions was the series that actively confirmed White Fox, exists in the main Marvel universe, because the canon of Avengers Electric Rain is dubious at best. You can see the pieces add up here, though. This is a character very tied to Marvel's video games, and those games typically have a pretty good audience in Asia. So the character first appears in an Asia-exclusive comic, then she appears in English in a video game tie-in. All of this feels like it's building to her release in the Contest of Champions game, which makes sense. This Contest of Champions tie-in again released in 2015, so when did White Fox actually release in the game? She didn't. White Fox is not playable in Contest of Champions. Her first appearance in the main Marvel Universe, her first appearance in the English language, is in a tie-in comic to a video game that White Fox isn't in. What are we doing? For the life of me, I have no idea why White Fox is in Contest of Champions. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like she's bad in this comic. She's much better written than she was in Electric Rain. She fits into the story effectively. There is nothing wrong with her presence. I'm just confused as to how it happened. Again, this is the same year that Electric Rain wrapped up. So how did this Korean exclusive character who had never been translated end up in this book? That's a question for the ages and not one I have an answer to. The good news is that it doesn't really matter. There is a reason why I called Electric Rain technically White Fox's first appearance. That is where she appeared first chronologically, but you really can take Contest of Champions as her comic debut. Lord knows you don't need to read Electric Rain to understand this book, and this one gives her actual characterization and personality. So from here, we can just start her history for real. In Contest of Champions, White Fox is still an officially sanctioned superhero working for the South Korean government. Her costume has gotten quite an upgrade, but her status quo is much the same. When we first meet White Fox, she is investigating the disappearance of another South Korean superhero, the highly weaponized android Gunnar. Gunnar was kidnapped by unknown forces and possibly scrapped for parts, which is concerning on a couple levels. Not only is a hero gone, his weapons are probably now in the hands of evil, so figuring out what happened is high priority. The kidnapper in question turned out to be the Maestro, an evil future version of Hulk, who along with his collaborators, the Elders of the Universe, like the Collector and Grandmaster, was grabbing up various heroes from different realities and forcing them to fight each other in a grand contest of champions. Who could have seen that coming? As such, a lot of this series takes place within the Battle World pocket dimension that hosts all of the Contest of Champion fights, which is, of course, also the world that the video game takes place in. White Fox's role within the story is very specific. She is the operative outside of Battle World. She is not part of the contest, at least not until the end, and she is instead the super spy government agent from the main reality who is investigating where everyone is going, eventually figures out what's happening, and helps people to escape. As will be a recurring theme for this entire video, this is very straightforward. This and White Fox's next couple appearances don't add a lot of lore to the character. They do establish the whole Kumiho thing, but her full origin wouldn't get revealed until a couple years later in 2019, as I already said. Otherwise, she is a South Korean super spy. That's the beginning and the end of it. She next appears in a couple of one-shots when characters need to go to South Korea for various reasons, and she is a more major character in the Domino Hot Shots miniseries. And while these don't establish much to her background, they do at least give her enough personality to not just be a stock agent character anymore. Ami Han is inherently a very practical person. Much of her own character arc as it would develop over the next couple years revolves around her being the last of her kind and doing whatever is necessary to ensure that that kind of tragedy doesn't happen again. She will kill people, she will seduce and manipulate them. In Domino Hot Shots, she actively attempts to betray her team so that she can fuse herself with celestial tech and gain more power. Though she does flip on this at the end and ends up not doing it because she isn't really evil, she's just dedicated, which often makes her come off cold and emotionless. She really does fit the archetype of the Fox Spirit character, and as, again, straightforward as it seems, if you have in your mind the personality of Super Spy Fox Spirit, yeah, you kind of have White Fox exactly right already. In a similar vein, let's go ahead and address White Fox's powers briefly, because they are... Man, take a shot every time I say the word straightforward in this video. Don't do that, you'll be in a lot of trouble. Her powers are pretty much what you'd think they are. White Fox has a wide range of superpowers, but all of them are things that you would find in classic Fox Spirit folklore. They roughly fall into three categories. First off, she can shapeshift into a nine-tailed fox form, though this is not a binary transformation, it's on a sliding scale. She can shapeshift just a little bit to gain claws, she can turn into a half-and-half form for enhanced fighting capability, or if she really needs to let loose, she can transform entirely. While in her humanoid form especially, White Fox can also hypnotize people. The classic Kumiho myth has these spirits shapeshifting into beautiful women so that they can seduce men and then eat them. And yeah, she can do that too. She can hypnotize and allure people into doing what she wants. And then the third main ability is, the killing part. White Fox can absorb a target's life force, causing them to die instantly, though this is not a power she uses often, both because it is a drastic solution and also it is very close range. It seems from the few times we've seen her use this power that she has to kiss someone for it to take effect. And that's it. There's no more nuance here. You know White Fox's abilities now. They're straightforward. This video is actually kind of driving me crazy because I'm so used to doing these huge deep dives on complex shifting lore that having a character who really is as simple as she seems on the surface is genuinely throwing me for a loop. Anyway, that is not going to stop for the whole video, so I just need to keep going. Getting back to White Fox's history, her next era is one of her longer ones, and this is as part of the Agents of Atlas team, specifically the newer iteration of the team that debuted in 2019. This Agents of Atlas group was Marvel's premier superhero team for Asia, the entirety of Asia, with representatives from a lot of different countries. The team was brought together by Jimmy Woo. Yes, that Jimmy Woo, though only by technicality. Jimmy is a very different character in the comics than he is in the movies. They first appeared in a tie-in miniseries to the quite fun War of the Realms event, which, to put it simply, is when a bunch of fantasy monsters from Thor comics started having a gigantic war over claim to Earth. A demonic being named Cinder, daughter of the fire giant Surtur, tried to take over Asia, and Jimmy's new superhero team fought her off, then leading into a couple different spin-off comics. Agents of Atlas features a lot of fun characters, and I'm sure I'll cover several of them in future videos, but we don't really have to go into a lot of detail on the team today, because while White Fox is part of the Agents of Atlas, she's also kinda not. Amihan is around in the Agents of Atlas comics. If you look on her appearance list, there's a huge chunk of Agents of Atlas in there, but she's really only a team member by proxy. Her main commitment is not as part of Jimmy Woo's organization, it is still as an agent of the Korean government. She works with the Agents of Atlas because they often have shared goals, but she is by no means a main character. She kind of just appears in team shots and various fights. At this point in the video, something should be fairly obvious about White Fox. I mean, I've called attention to it directly in enough jokes that it should be obvious at least. White Fox is not, and has never been, a major character by any means, which, as I said just a couple minutes ago, is making this video weird to produce. For all the other videos that I've done on obscure rivals characters, I've been able to say, here's all the fun, weird history of these characters that you've never heard of before. But for White Fox, she just doesn't really have that. At this point, I've already covered all of her major arcs, barring one more thing that I'm going to address in a bit more detail towards the end of the video. Throughout her entire history, White Fox has only appeared in 76 comics ever, which is not the smallest amount, it's more than Luna Snow, but a good chunk of these are minor or background appearances. Out of those, 16 of them are Avengers Electric Reign, where she's a stock character with no personality. 12 of those are Agents of Atlas, where she does have more of a personality, but is not directly relevant to the plot at all. And 8 of those are in the Contest of Champions miniseries that I already talked about, where she is part of the plot, but largely as a B storyline that only connects to the main stuff towards the end. So that in total is 36 out of her 76 appearances, and a good chunk of the remaining 40 are one-offs, single issues or brief arcs where other established characters have to go to South Korea for one reason or another. Ultimately, White Fox is an inherently local character, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It might sound like I'm criticizing this or being negative, but that's just because it's an inherently weird thing for me to describe on a lore channel. I guess a fair way to put it would be that White Fox is often less of a plot character and more of a world-building element. Much of Marvel's storylines take place in the United States, because it's an American company, they were founded by Americans, all that makes sense. But Marvel is a universe, and there are superhero things going on in other parts of the globe. White Fox is one of those global elements. White Fox appears most frequently as a piece of South Korea as a setting. Think of it like this. If a foreign superhero started suddenly operating on American soil, chances are that someone from S.H.I.E.L.D. might pay them a visit to make sure that everything is operating all right. White Fox is just that for a different country. If an American superhero goes to South Korea, White Fox is going to show up as a part of that government. Taskmaster has a storyline in South Korea, so White Fox fights him. Deadpool has a storyline in South Korea, so White Fox fights him. Black Cat has a storyline in South Korea, so White Fox fights her. There is a Rivals connection there at least. These two have met in the comics on one occasion. There is one character that she more frequently appears alongside as a secondary character for, and that is Lin Lie in both his identities as Swordmaster and Iron Fist. White Fox has teamed up with Lin on several occasions. I believe they first met in Agents of Atlas, but have just gotten closer since then. In a currently releasing series, Deadly Hands of Kunlun, the two are actually dating, though this is an ongoing comic, so I'm not sure how long that's gonna last. It hasn't reached a conclusion yet. And throughout all of this, throughout almost 80 appearances of White Fox being a set piece or a secondary character, she has only had a starring role in 6 comics ever, and all of them are minor. The first was her origin story flashback comic that I talked about right at the beginning of the video. The second was a tie-in to the Death of Doctor Strange event alongside Lin Lie, and the remaining 4 are part of what Marvel calls an Infinity comic. For those not familiar with the term, Infinity Comic is basically Marvel's fancy way of saying webcomic. They are available on their subscription service, Marvel Unlimited, and have an infinite scrolling webcomic style format. White Fox did get a 4-issue miniseries of these, but Infinity Comics are usually shorter than average and almost always self-contained, rarely branching out to other things. All this comes together to make White Fox's inclusion in Marvel Rivals just truly wild to me, because as I said in the intro, she is far and away the most obscure and, as you now know, minor character that they've ever put into the game. But do I think that's a bad thing? No, actually quite the opposite. I really like that they're doing it. In terms of White Fox's character in general, there is nothing wrong with her being more of a world-building element than a character. That's just something that's bound to happen when you're writing a universe as large as Marvel, and it's completely acceptable in narrative terms. Most of Marvel's stories take place in America, and characters like White Fox exist to remind the reader that the universe is in fact fleshed out. When characters go to Asia, or more specifically South Korea, they're going to run into White Fox because superhero stuff is also happening there, you just don't see it as often. And in terms of her inclusion in Rivals, I'm glad that they're committed to keeping oddball characters in the game. It helps the roster feel more unique and varied than just all the mainstream or MCU characters. And also, every time they add a weirdo, I get to make a video on it, and it helps me pay my bills for the month. So, in summary, I don't have a lot to say about White Fox. I think she's a fine character, she's good at the role that she was designed to fill, and I'm all here for her Rivals inclusion. But now I'm kind of done. And this video is what, like 22, 23 minutes long once I finish editing it, something like that? I can't stop here. There's no way I can do a 20-minute video. You guys are here for the long stuff. I guess there is one related concept that I can do. Sure, let's make this one a little bit longer. I did promise a couple minutes ago that there was one more major White Fox arc that I was going to talk about for a good chunk of the video, and that is her relation to other superheroes in South Korea. As I've said several times at this point, she is more of a setting element. White Fox exists to facilitate these kind of superhero stories from a world-building standpoint, and in more recent comics, they've leaned into this by kind of making White Fox the South Korean Nick Fury. A few years ago, Ami Han got a promotion. She still works for the South Korean government and still does field operations as White Fox on occasion, but more often she operates as Director Han, leader and overseer of an entire South Korean superhero team called Tiger Division. Tiger Division is a fun little group full of almost entirely new characters. They are more recent than White Fox is. They first debuted in 2021, but hilariously, Tiger Division has been the star of 10 comics to White Fox's 6, so I guess by technicality, they are equally major and important as she is. And since I'm sure no one on this channel will argue with hearing about more obscure superheroes, and I want to get this video to, like at least a half hour, let's go through all the members of Tiger Division 2. Why not? There are 6 members of Tiger Division, 7 if you count White Fox as their director figure, and we'll start with the one who is the team's field leader most of the time, Tae-won, otherwise known as Taegukgi. This guy is essentially a hybrid of Superman and Captain America thematically. For those who don't know, his superhero codename, Taegukgi, is also the literal proper name for the Korean flag, so the patriotic inspiration is not subtle. Continuing the Captain America parallels, Tae-won was born in 1950, and as a young man joined a criminal gang led by a man who he saw as his adopted older brother. As the gang grew in power, their operations became more and more dangerous, and on one fateful day, they decided to raid a government laboratory so that they could steal and sell the scientific equipment within. During that, Tae-won was struck by the energies of a magical Asgardian gem that the government had been working with, and was given superpowers. These powers include Superman. He's Superman. The other members of Tiger Division are a bit more unique, but Taegukgi's parallel is very, very obvious. He's not a bad character per se, I just don't have that much more to say about him. The Asgardian magic did slow his aging though, so he still looks relatively young in the modern day, and at some point during his life he joined Tiger Division and has a whole arc where his adopted brother figure from decades past turns out to still be alive and evil. Pretty standard superhero stuff. Taegukgi is, say it with me now, straightforward. Secondly, for Tiger Division's roster, we have Gunnar 2. You might remember earlier in the video, there was a South Korean superhero named Gunnar, but we first saw him in a comic featuring White Fox, where he had been kidnapped and killed. The original Gunnar never actually appears on the page. His first appearance is the investigation of his death. Gunnar 2 is literally just the second version of Gunnar, built to succeed the original. He is a highly weaponized super robot, but does kind of defy the conventions of personality when it comes to that archetype of superhero. Typically, robot hero characters fall into one of two groups. They are either cold and emotionless or computational, or they're more like the Vision, where they're very intelligent and philosophical about their existence. Gunnar 2 is neither of these. He's just kind of like a dude. He is very aware of his reality and what he is, and he's just chill with it. He is rarely ever the focus, but whenever he's on the page, he is quite fun. Then, speaking of self-aware construct characters, Tiger Division actually has 2 of them. This is the General, who I think is my favorite Tiger Division member. I love his character design. It's very simple yet effective. The General is an ancient magical totem brought to life by a sorcerer in the Joseon era of South Korea, which from a quick Google search is roughly about the 1300s to the 1800s, so somewhere in there. He was created simply to protect innocent people, especially when it came to villages being raided, and he's just kind of kept that duty up until the modern day. And since he was created by a sorcerer explicitly for the purposes of protection, he's very nice. The General falls into a trope of character that I've seen many times before but will always love, which is big, terrifying guy who doesn't necessarily want to fight and will always try to find a peaceful solution first. He's like 8 feet tall and he's made of magic rock and he could pound you into a pulp with one fist if he wanted, but he's gonna try and talk it out first, and I love him. He also has an interesting cultural parallel to Gunnar, which I learned as I was researching for this video. Apparently, putting 2 artificial characters on Tiger Division was very intentional, as the idea is to have 2 creations of South Korea representing both the past and the future. The General is the more traditional mystical history of the country, and then Gunnar is their technological future, different eras working for the same goal at different periods. Sticking in the South Korean mysticism era, we have the next member of the team, Mr. Enigma, who I think is going to be very popular among the YouTube audience. Mr. Enigma is an ancient demigod. If he's based on a specific figure from mythology, I don't know, they've never said. All that we know is that he's very old, has a lot of powers, and uses those powers mostly just to drink and fight and party all the time. He has the standard strength, speed, durability, etc., but his more iconic superpower is elemental manipulation. Not the 4 alchemical elements that we more frequently see in the modern day, though. He has control over the 5 traditional elements of Korean mysticism, those being earth, fire, water, wood, and metal. All that is interesting enough, but it's not the reason that I say he's going to be more popular with YouTube, though. No, that is the little we know about his origin and how he joined Tiger Division. He actually didn't join the team willingly at first. He was arrested by the government for causing a disturbance, and then they tried to recruit him to the team by force with a sort of Suicide Squad method of injecting a bomb into his neck. Mr. Enigma just kind of went along with this for a while, and then the bomb went off. And he was fine, because he's a demigod. He didn't care at all. But even after the government lost control over him, he decided to stick around because 1, they provide him with a lot of alcohol to keep his loyalty, and 2, by sticking with the super team, he gets to get into a lot of fights with villains that he just genuinely enjoys. So he's part of Tiger Division purely because he thinks it's fun. I want to see him fight Thor so badly, man. It's never happened, and as I say that out loud, maybe it's never happened because it definitely wouldn't end up in a fight and would just devolve into a drinking contest. But still, I want to see that too. Now, second to last on Tiger Division, we have a character who actually has used 2 superhero code names. I'm going to begin with the one she's using currently, simply Lady Bright, and I'm going to keep her original one towards the end of the description for comedic effect. Lady Bright is the member of the team who I think has the least development out of all of them. Even though Taegukgi is probably the simplest on the surface, he does have a whole comic explaining his origin, which Lady Bright never even got. Still, even though I don't have a ton to say about her due to the simple lack of information, I do think her concept looks cool in practice. Lady Bright is a gambling-themed sorcerer whose magic is card-based. She is admittedly a character that exists more for the visuals than anything else, but her visuals do kind of rule. I mean, we've seen with Gambit that card-based superpowers look awesome, and Lady Bright is no exception. She can shoot cards, she can make shields out of cards, she flies by surfing around on a giant playing card. I mean, tell me that's not awesome. In terms of her personality, she is definitely the most independent of Tiger Division. There's an arc where the team gets more directly controlled by the government, and when that happens, she bails instantly, which does track with the little bit of lore we know about her, which is just that she is, by some large measure, older than she looks, so she kind of has the sorcerer who's seen all this before vibe going on. I definitely think she has a lot of potential, which probably isn't surprising if you've been on my channel for a while. You know I love a good magic superhero. Unfortunately, some of her potential is wasted by her name change. I said she had 2 code names. The first one, in my opinion, is way better. For some reason, after her original appearance, they changed her name to Lady Bright. But the first comic that we see her in has her code name being Auntie. Like anti like relative or older figure, and then anti like cards? That's hilarious. Bring that back, Marvel. I wish that was her name all the time. It also works culturally, I think. I'm by no means an expert in this, so if I'm wrong, please correct me, but like, auntie, or maybe a translated version of auntie, is a term of respect for older female figure in a lot of Asian cultures, and her whole thing is that she's actually a lot older than she looks and knows a lot of stuff. So that name, it made a lot of sense. Why did they change it? Anyway, that aside, we are now at the last member of Tiger Division, who I saved for last because she is the most known of them. Which feels wild to say, because even a few years ago, barely anyone knew who she was, but this is Luna Snow. Of course, the K-pop superstar is going to be on the South Korean superhero team. Nobody should be surprised by this. For anyone who is not familiar with Luna Snow's origin, I'll run through that quickly. She was a K-pop star first, and then her entire group got held hostage inside of a Stark Industries cold fusion reactor, and at some point during that whole incident, the reactor activated and gave her ice powers. Then, much like in her rival's interpretation, she continued being both a K-pop star and a superhero at the same time, which is absolutely perfect for a group like Tiger Division, as they still are a government organization, so having one of their members be a widely beloved celebrity is a PR dream. And that's the entire roster. Most of their members are pretty quick to describe because Tiger Division ultimately hasn't been in a lot of comics. I do like the lineup a lot, probably because it does skew kind of magical, and that's my exact vibe, but that's just me. Tiger Division first debuted in a Taskmaster comic written by Jed MacKay, and then they were in a one-off Black Cat comic, also written by Jed MacKay, so the group is really just Jed MacKay's babies, and that's fine, because he's a fantastic writer. Then they got their own 5-issue miniseries. This one is by a Korean writer, Emily Kim, and it is good, though it does mostly focus on Taegukgi. It probably could have been sold as just his series. Most of the other members are secondary characters. And then most recently, actually very recently, in just the last couple of months, Tiger Division showed up again in a tie-in comic to the One World Under Doom event, where Dr. Doom successfully takes over Earth and rules it as a dictator. This tie-in was called Doom's Division, so from the name, you can kind of guess exactly what happened. Tiger Division gets rebranded to Doom's Division as he exerts more direct control over them. This was also a pretty fun book, as was common to all the One World Under Doom tie-ins. The main conflict was that Doom is being a dictator and rules the world, but he's also providing free healthcare and transport and things like that. So what is the price of dictatorship when it is helping people out? It's a good comic, I would recommend it. It's only 5 issues and it just released last year, though I will note it does kind of leave Tiger Division in a weird place, and I'm not sure where they're going to be going from here. The book ends, I'll spoil it a little bit, but you could all see where this is going, with Tiger Division deciding to throw off the shackles of Doom, becoming Tiger Division again instead of Doom's Division, and going against him. But then the book is over, and then they didn't really show up again in One World Under Doom, and now One World Under Doom is done. So I have no idea what their status is. But that at least does allow me to bring things back around to White Fox, who this video was originally about, because I really don't have any idea what's going to be going on for these characters, I gotta be real. As I think I've made fairly clear over the course of this video, White Fox being in Rivals is crazy. It's a pick that I like, but if there weren't leaks ahead of time, it is never a pick that I would have predicted in a million years. NetEase, the company that makes Marvel Rivals, has shown to really like the Asian side of the Marvel Universe, which makes sense. They're a Chinese company, so they're adding characters from their more local regions. We've seen that with Luna Snow, Lin Lie being Iron Fist, etc. But even with that context, White Fox is never one I would have called. It really feels like they just looked at this one specific Black Cat one-shot where Black Cat and White Fox have a team up and said, sure, we can put them together in the same season. As for why White Fox is going to be operating in New York City for this season, that's also anyone's guess. It seems like the plot of this season, of course I'm recording this video before it comes out, is going to be Black Cat stealing something, likely on behalf of Kingpin, and what she's stealing seems to be an item called the Lifeline Tablet. I thought at first that this was going to be some magical Korean artifact, and so the reason White Fox was in New York City was so that she could get it back. But no, looking it up, the Lifeline Tablet is a thing from Spider-Man comics, so maybe they're just connecting it to Korean mysticism in the Rivals lore? It doesn't have a lot of backstory in the comics, so that wouldn't really conflict with anything. I'm also going to cut in with one more line here right at the end. I'm adding this after the fact, literally the day before she releases in-game, but because she releases tomorrow, her voice lines have been revealed. And I just want to note, man, am I very glad that I decided to cover Tiger Division as well, because it does seem like the Marvel Rivals version of White Fox is really leaning into the Director Han of Tiger Division angle. Though I should also mention very quickly that the Marvel Rivals universe interpretation of Tiger Division does seem to be a little bit different. Voice lines compare it to S.H.I.E.L.D., so it seems like in Rivals, Tiger Division is the entire intelligence agency, not just the super team like in the comics, and I'm not sure what the status of the other superheroes is. I gotta say though, it is nice to be caught off guard with a character addition. Even with the other less known ones like Angela and Elsa Bloodstone, those were people I maybe could have expected. Not this time. Though I will say, I wish they'd given me a bit more notice. They announced this character officially midday last Tuesday, which means I had to get this entire video out in like 2.5 days. Thank God White Fox is inherently easy, or there's no way I could have done that. But that's what I'm here for. Whenever Rivals adds an obscure weirdo, I will be around to give you the lore, even if there isn't much of it. And hey, Rivals is still popular enough, maybe White Fox's inclusion will lead to a resurgence in her character and hopefully Tiger Division as a whole. There is definitely untapped potential there. For now though, we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. I can officially now say that this game has really, genuinely surprised me, so who knows what else is in store. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I do hope you enjoyed this video that I had to blast out at speedster pace. My god, what a rush job this was, but I did it, and I think it's solid enough, and that's what matters. Announcements are usual for today. As always, I have a Patreon. If you go and check that out, you can find early and ad-free access to all of my videos, as well as a Patreon exclusive video every month. My username there is the exact same as it is here. There's also a link in the description of this video and on my channel page. It's very easy to find, and extra double thank you to everyone who already supports me over there. It really does help me keep making these videos for you guys. Also, shout out to Ruben Perez, the artist I work with for these videos. He drew the poses of the character you've been watching talk at you for the last 40 minutes or so. Go check out his work if you have a chance. And now, right at the end of the video, hey, NetEase and Marvel Games, surely somebody from your companies watches my videos, and if you stuck around to the end, you added White Fox. You added a character as obscure as White Fox. Add Sleepwalker to the game, you cowards. Put my boy in the game. He deserves to be there. His kid could be so cool. Put him in the— I need to calm down. But you made a joke about it in one of the Deadpool lines, and I'm choosing to believe that joke was specifically for me. I'll wait, Marvel. You gotta put him in eventually, and when you do, I'll be here.